Have you ever wondered what goes on inside the minds of married men? Author Stephen Fried discusses it all in his new book of essays called Husbandry: Sex, Love, and Dirty Laundry.
Husbandry is a collection of pieces I've been writing over the last 4 years. The basic idea was a magazine editor came to me and said, could you please explain to me why men act the way they do and how do they think? And I told her that men don't think, which is why they act the way they do. Women always complain they don't know what what goes through their minds. And so the idea was that I would write about what goes through my mind and all the husbands that I know. It seemed to be the most basic issue between men and women, at least in my marriage, was why men couldn't remember to do the things that their wives had asked them to do 1,000,000 times. Why do you take your socks and throw them on the floor next to the laundry basket rather than throwing them into the laundry basket, which is something that I do, and I've now learned basically every man in the world does. And the whole thing about husbandry is that a lot of these issues are things that people say, oh, this is such small stuff. But it really isn't. It's the stuff of everyday life in your relationship. It's the stuff that people argue about, laugh about, and live with. My idea was to try to find a word that really captured what it's about to be not only a husband, but to be a spouse, to be a significant other. Because one of the things that's very true in writing about husbandry is that these issues aren't only about being married. They're about being in a couple. And as soon as you're in a couple, as soon as you live together or quasi-live together, most of the issues of husbandry come forward. When you commit to marriage, they become more intense. How can you write about husbandry? How can you write about marriage and not talk about sex? So I think that a lot of these pieces are about sex, because a lot of what underlies all marital issues is sex or the lack of sex. So it started out because I looked up the statistics. I'll often go and have my interns dig up scientific research on the subject. So we went and found how many times are we supposed to be having sex. The issue that I tried to get to was whether you still had good sex, regardless of the number of times, and whether that was a bigger issue for people. And I must say the mail was all about that. It was all about that. And that was very nice to see, even though I must say I got a couple letters from people in their 80s who were having a lot more sex than me. And that was a little, embarrassing. The focus that people put on gifts and relationships is huge. And one of the things that's very interesting about it, you have this whole thing of men trying to figure out what their wives want. If they don't, the wives want to know why they don't know them. Because underlying all these issues is if you don't do a certain thing, is why don't you know me? One of the coolest things about this, when I go and talk about husbandry with people, is just the outpouring, especially from wives. You get 5 wives together who've read this material, and all of a sudden they're just telling you every story about their husbands. You become like their surrogate husband, because their husband would never listen to them complain about this. They already know the husband the eyes roll back, or the remote control gets higher and higher and higher. These pieces can set off conversations in people's relationships in a safer way than if the same subjects had come up in the middle of an inflammatory moment. Because the other thing that happens in marriage is people think it's only them. And so when they see that their experiences are so shared and so common, and that the problems are insurmountable, then you can kind of laugh at that. But when you think it's only you and it's only your marriage, I think you can get very isolated, and that's when it gets a little bit dangerous. So I have a lot of high hopes for this, because a lot of my own feelings and a lot of my own marriage went into the writing of Husbandry. So I hope it'll have the same kind of power for people that it had for us.